Hey everybody, what's good? What's going on? JB here, back with another CyberInsight live stream. Been a minute since I've hopped on. I think the past month or so have really been focused on filming some Azure networking lab videos and haven't really come on live and chatted with folks. So today, that's what I'm doing. And the reason for that is because last week I went and successfully took and passed the Azure AZ-700 networking implementing. I always get the name jacked up on this. Let me read this correctly once, and then I won't try and say it again. The designing and implementing Microsoft Azure networking solutions exam. Good thing they don't actually ask you to memorize that when you go and take the test. But AZ-700 for short, that is what it is. It is their networking focused exam. And honestly, it was pretty challenging. If you've kind of followed the different stuff that I've done over the past few years, you know that I've hit up a whole bunch of different vendors, cloud certs, did the initial Azure AZ-900, their fundamental cert. I've done like maybe 3 AWS certs. I did the ISE squared CCSP, which is kind of like their advanced cloud cert. So this one was the first one I did that was completely focused on networking, which is what my background and what my passion is, the things that I really like doing. So I was really excited to do this. And yeah, I've been kind of studying for it, I don't know, maybe about 3 months or so. And once I started to dig into that, that's when I started doing all the different Azure lab videos that you've seen me be putting out recently. So today I just wanted to kind of talk my way through it for other folks who are unsure if they want to take the exam or they are in the process of doing that and they wanted a little reassurance, maybe some study tips and some helpful resources that they could use so they could successfully prepare to be able to go and take that exam. So that's what we're going to be doing today as we move through. As always, if you have any questions or comments, throw those in the chat window. We'll hit those up. Everything that I'm talking about today, I've already put links for in the video description, so you can go and check all that stuff out. And I'm going to hit up all the stuff, both paid and free, and talk about how that helped me. We're going to do a little bit of an overview of the exam itself, both from a logistical perspective and then also kind of the different points that you need to make sure that you're studying and you know to be able to go in there and successfully pass the exam. So I'm going to hop over into my browser and we're going to do that. As always, if you're here, I always appreciate if you smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff that comes along with that. So let's see, we're going to move over here and kind of do the high level stuff first. Just talk about what the AZ-700 is. You know, one of the first things that you're always wondering when it comes to these types of exams is how much is it going to cost you to get into this. This one actually isn't that bad. It's only $165. Uh, Microsoft actually does a pretty good job throughout the year of sometimes offering up different types of discount codes and programs where you hypothetically could get to take certain exams of theirs for free. I didn't get lucky enough to fall into that, although I did do that for my Azure Fundamentals exam. So keep an eye out for that stuff. Their self-paced training programs are really comprehensive and very good, and we're going to actually talk about the one specifically for this exam here in a little bit. But that's always a great avenue to go down if you can get the free training, and then if it's coincides with one of their programs where they're trying to incentivize people to go take the exam. Sometimes they'll either offer exams for free or 50% off. So 165 is a jump off point here. Kind of the different ways or different things that we need to be focused on from a very, very high level is designing and implementing core networking infrastructure, designing, implementing, and manage connectivity services, application delivery services, private access to Azure services, and secure network connectivity to Azure resources. If you have no idea what any of those mean or it's a little bit fuzzy, don't worry, we're going to dive deep into those and all the different things that kind of coincides with that. The other things that kind of worth mentioning here, this is a good page. I also like this kind of roadmap here that kind of lays out a whole bunch of different stuff. A lot of the information between these two pages is the same, pretty much just talking about the study guide, the fact that they have self-paced training, which is free, which is what I've been basing those lab videos that I've been doing off of that. And then they also have an instructor-led course if you want to actually pay for that. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend doing that when there's other cloud resources out there that you can pay for that would be cheaper than that. But then they have some exam preparation stuff. They have a Microsoft Official Practice Test. I did not take that. I used some other practice tests that I'm going to talk about, but I have heard very good things about this. The only thing is, if I remember correctly, this is kind of expensive, which was kind of the reason that I didn't jump into that. And like I said, we're going to hit all this up. And just to kind of see where this falls into the overall scope of Azure certifications, you kind of have these different pillars here dealing with Azure 365, Power Platform, and then kind of their security, compliance, and identity stuff. It's kind of broken down into between fundamentals, role-based, and specialties. This particular exam falls underneath their role-based stuff under Azure. So you can see the Azure Network Engineer Associate right here. One thing that they don't necessarily mention on those pages there, though, which would be helpful to know, is kind of what you have going on for time limit, number of questions, and things like that. That actually varies per exam. I think there's kind of like some general numbers that it kind of goes around. For me, it was 100 minutes and 40 questions. But before you get too excited about the idea of only having 40 questions, a lot of those questions required looking at a lot of different artifacts, and then also multiple questions within the question. And so an example of that would be a question where they give you a scenario and then maybe a few different screenshots of things you need to look at. And then you need to answer like 3 or 4 questions underneath that, specifically, stating whether or not something is true or false, or picking different answers out of, the different things that are available there. So it might only count as one question, but really there's like 5 within that. The good thing with these Azure exams, and I really like the way that they handle this compared to other certification vendors, is the fact that you do get partial credit. So on questions that it's like, multiple choice and you're supposed to pick multiple answers, if you do pick one of the correct ones, you will get credit for that. In this case, for the scenario that I was mentioning, where you have multiple questions underneath one question, each question or sub-question counts for 1 point. So it does help you out. The score that you needed to be able to pass this was 700. On mine, I got a 755. It was a very challenging exam, but again, I like the way that Azure does their exams. They weren't necessarily questions that were trying to trick you. And I've seen that kind of with some other vendors. With this, the questions were pretty much straightforward. You either knew the things or you didn't, which highlighted the areas that you were really strong in and the areas that you weren't very strong in. For me, definitely kind of like the basics of the networking and infrastructure things, very strong with. Hybrid connectivity, so that's like things like VPNs, both site to site and point to site, so like user-based VPNs. Things like ExpressRoute, so connecting data centers with private circuits back into the cloud. All those things really strong with. The security stuff I was really strong with. The stuff that I actually kind of struggled the most with, I wouldn't even say I like struggle, but just definitely not my strong suit, is their stuff dealing with all of their different options for how to configure their load balancers. So they have like 4 different types of load balancers that have different purposes. And then they really do get into the deep details of how to configure things and the order in which you need to configure things. So it's not just so much to know like, oh, in this scenario, you need to use this particular type of device. It's you need to know that you need to use this type of device, and these are the things that you would need to do in a particular order in order to successfully implement it. So kind of just something to keep in the back of your mind with that, as far as like the granular aspects of the information that you need to make sure that you understand and can implement. Let me think about some other things specific to the exam. So like I said, I had 40 questions. a lot of different types of questions. So these do have the possibility of having labs. I did not get a lab. For most people that I saw that had recently took it, I would say probably like 95% did not get a lab, but there were some people that did say that they did get some labs on there. So just be aware that that could happen. So don't go into it totally expecting not to see a lab, and then you kind of crap your pants when one pops up. So there's definitely a lot of hands-on practice that you need to be able to do to master the different topics that fall within learning objectives. So you have, like I said, a whole bunch of different questions. I didn't have a lab, but what I did have, and what pretty much ubiquitously across the board everybody says they have, is what's known as case studies. And what this is they dump a whole bunch of different artifacts. So it's going to be a whole bunch of different like screenshots of different types of things. So maybe information about the Azure environment. And then they kind of give you an overall story about this particular environment, what's currently there, and then what they want you to implement going forward. And then based off of all of these different things, they have a bunch of different questions. Maybe it's 7 questions, maybe it's 10 questions. And remember, as I said, some of those questions actually have multiple questions within them. The case studies definitely seems to be a part that people might get a little bit flustered on. So just be aware of that is a thing that you're going to have to do. The interesting thing with that is once you go in to do the case study, you can't actually go back to it once you're done. So you can cycle through the questions that are within the case study, but you can't, once you're done with it, go answer a few more questions in the exam. Maybe you see something that jogs your memory, like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to go back and change this question in the case study. Nah, you're locked out of the case study at that point. So just be aware, and some people might have a strategy of, oh, okay, I'll just bang through the questions that I know in the case study, the stuff that's still kind of up in the air, I'll come back to it later. You can't do that. You got to make sure that you answer all those within that. So definitely set aside some time to be able to do that. I want to say I probably spent maybe 25 or 30 minutes on my case study. I think it was a little bit less than 10 questions, but that obviously differs between the different case studies that they give folks. Other types of questions that you're going to run into, you're going to see, your normal questions of multiple choice. You're not going to get very many questions of multiple choice where the answer is super obvious. There was a handful where I was like, just read the question. I'm like, oh, automatically, that's it. Most of them, it's going to be a little bit more in depth than that. Then they also had other types of questions where it was multiple choice, multiple answers. Then they had some questions where it actually was drag and drop. Then they had some questions that was drag and drop in the particular order or sequence of events that you needed to do. And then they had some questions that were like true or false types of questions. So like, given this scenario, which of the below things is true, or which of the below things is absolutely not true? So I actually kind of find them mixing up the types of questions to be fun and challenging. So it breaks up the monotony of like the normal types of exams that we're used to taking. I think if there's anything else that I wanted to hit kind of like on the basics of that. I don't think so. Let me see. I got some questions coming in here. We can kind of start to throw those up. Whoa, I don't know why I made it that big. We don't need to be that big, but I appreciate you, Rob, dropping in. Good morning, wherever you're at. Let's see. Congrats on the exam. Appreciate that. I'm currently studying for this cert with a training offered by my job. Okay, awesome. So what type of training are they giving you through your job? Are they paying for like some other like cloud courses or something like that? Let's see. I just got my Sec Plus over the weekend and I'm exploring to see what cert I want next, either AWS, Azure. See why I say. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you can go with that. With the cloud stuff, I guess I would say it depends on what type of environments you're working in. Doesn't necessarily make too much sense to go and start taking exams on stuff that isn't relevant when you have other stuff that is relevant. The CYSA is a great cert as well if you're kind of, going more on the defensive side of things. But yeah, all great opportunities there, and would be beneficial no matter what. Let's see. There are a lot of questions about SKU types and resources that would be best and most cost efficient. Yeah, so you definitely want to know your SKUs across the board when it comes to different types of VPN devices, when it comes to IP addresses, when it comes to ExpressRoute, when it comes to, I could just list off everything that falls under learning objectives. If it has a SKU, you're going to want to kind of know the differences between those, the different types of load balancers. And then, yes, cost efficiency can definitely come into play when it comes to questions. Different types of functionality or security functions can also come into play. And so obviously knowing, which SKUs provide those additional benefits would be some other types of things that you might run into in that scenario. Let's see. Then you said I work for an Azure MSP, so it's in. Oh, okay, gotcha. Cool. Well, if you're already using Azure, then learning that in-house obviously would be the best way to go. And then you aren't getting hit with any bills, hopefully. All right, so now we're going to move a little bit and talk about the specific topics that the exam actually covers. This is the study guide for AZ-700. I'll put a link for this in the video description. This document is a little bit longer than it needs to be at this point because it's still covering the changes that happened after February 2. Since we're having this conversation now and it's after February 2, all the stuff prior to February 2 really doesn't affect you, and so you don't even really need to care about this. If you were looking to study for things and you were looking to take this, previously, or you were on the fence and you might have, trying to be like, oh, do I want to take it in January or February? Then this stuff would matter. But since it's not the case, doesn't really matter so much. So we're just going to talk about the stuff after February 2. One other interesting thing to note with this particular exam and the rest of the associate, expert, and specialty certifications for Microsoft, you actually have to recert annually. And I haven't done this yet with them, so we'll see how this kind of goes. It sounds a little frightening isn't the word, but like tedious maybe. But it is free. There's an online assessment. Let me bring up, I actually had a link here. So you have 6 months to actually do the renewal. The renewals are free. The renewals are open book, and you can take them as many times as you need to in order to recertify. So it's actually not as sticky as it kind of sounds, but I'll definitely have a much better perspective on this after I go to do this for the first time. So I guess the thing with this that I don't know the answer to, but I'll need to kind of figure this out, is what this means as far as the length of time of the validity of the certification itself. So if you just keep recerting or renewal every year, does that mean that you can do that in perpetuity? Is it becoming something kind of like ISC squared and their certs where you can just keep going? Or is there a period after 3 years or 5 years where you actually have to go and take a new exam? I don't know. I'll dig into that a little bit more, and maybe if I find out, then I'll share that information with everybody. Okay, so now let's see what else they have in here. Kind of already talked about the score 700, practice tests, and all that type of stuff where I said theirs was kind of expensive. Okay, so now let's break this down and look at all these different areas and what each of these actually mean and the stuff that's in here. So design and implement core networking infrastructure. So this is going to be kind of like your basic things that you think of from a networking perspective within an Azure environment. So this is going to be your IP addressing, This is going to be DNS. This is going to be your VNets, and kind of how to make sure you're able to monitor all of those things going on. So when it comes to building this stuff out, knowing how to build a VNet, knowing the purposes of how you segment that, subnets within a VNet, how availability zones work within that, how subnets and how you delegate IP addresses within there, both the difference between the public and private IP addresses, understanding the difference in the SKUs between the public and private VNets, static versus dynamic when it comes to those. There's some services, obviously, that the basic IP addresses for the basic public IP address SKU doesn't work with other types of things. Normally, we align it from the perspective of if it's a basic SKU for one thing, it probably needs to be a basic SKU for the other thing. So just kind of things to think about there. Probably a little bit of IPv6. The fact that you can bring your own custom public IP addresses, how you go about creating public IP addresses. And that actually leads pretty well into DNS. Different options that you have for DNS, both from a public and private perspective. The default options that you have with Azure, which aren't all that great, but it does work. But then probably the necessity to actually create a private zone, how you can link a private zone to a VNet, auto registration, things like that definitely would fall underneath there. And then VNet connectivity. Here you're talking about using VPNs to connect VNets. And then we're going to hit on VPNs with hybrid connectivity as well. But VPNs to connect VNets, VNET Peering as well. So using like the backbone to peer. The fact that the VNET Peering is non-transitive. So you either have to create a full mesh network or you need to kind of do a hub and spoke topology. And understanding if you do that, then you need some type of device within the hub that's able to do the routing, whether that's going to be some type of network virtual appliance, firewall, VPN device, something. And then the fact that once you get all that working, or at least connected, you're going to need to use user-defined routes, as far as point of default routes to whatever those routing devices are and things like that. Associating a route table with a subnet, force tunneling, a route server, how to implement that. A lot of these different services that they offer, I shouldn't say services, it is a service, but or appliances that they offer as well. Some of these need to have their own subnets. Sometimes the name for those subnets actually has to be specific. Other times it doesn't. So whether or not you're talking about like a bastion host subnet or firewall subnet or like an application gateway subnet, understanding which of those services actually need to have that implemented and the specifics behind whether or not the naming needs to be a certain nomenclature. We have NAT gateways, understanding the purpose for that, how many IPs you can associate with a NAT gateway, which type of IPs actually can go through a NAT gateway. Again, that kind of goes back to the basic or standard SKUs for IP addresses, how to implement those, and the purpose behind those. And then a little bit of troubleshooting for network traffic. So whether you're talking about the network watcher, you're talking about the troubleshooting tool, different scenarios where you might use those, DDoS. I'm actually kind of surprised that they put that under monitor networks. You would think that that actually would go under the security section down below. But yeah, the fact that there is distributed denial of service protection, the fact that there's a basic version which you don't need to do anything, or there's a standard version which you're able to do a bit more and get some alerting and things like that. Then the next section is design, implement, and manage connectivity services. So this is where we start talking about VPNs that aren't necessarily VNet to VNet. This is where we're talking about site-to-site VPN connection. So this is kind of talking about hybrid connectivity. Definitely you want to know the SKUs as far as different types of VPN devices. Pretty much you don't want to use the basic VPN SKU. unless you're like doing some type of lab stuff. You're severely limited with that, so it wouldn't actually be something that you probably would want to use in a production environment. How to go about implementing site-to-site VPN connections. There is configurations that you need to do within the cloud first, as far as creating the gateway device, making sure that it's a VPN gateway device, doing the configuration, then doing the local gateway configuration, which represents the remote configuration on site. Doing that, then pulling down, they put together pretty much a config that you can copy and paste into the particular flavor of VPN you have on site. There's some config modifications you need to do with that. So just being aware of the fact that you need to do all those things, and then kind of the order of operations and things like that are important things to understand. Policy-based versus route-based VPN options, IPsec, how to troubleshoot gateway connectivity issues, specifically which logs you want to look at when it comes to gateway issues, when it comes to routing issues with BGP. There's a few other types of logs related to the networking stuff that you want to make sure that you understand which log you want to go to when you're troubleshooting different types of things. Point to site, so this is user-based VPNs. There's a bunch of different types of options, so like OpenVPN. Certain ones only work with certain types of authentication. So for instance, OpenVPN will natively work with Azure AD. If you want to use Active Directory as your authentication mechanism, you need to ensure that you have a Radius server available. Which ones support certificate-based authentication, how to troubleshoot VPN client issues, especially if you're talking about like changing routes in the environment or adding new devices, what you need to do in order to make sure that the proper routes are being sent to the client. And ExpressRoute, this is kind of their version of data center to data center connectivity over private circuits. And there's a whole bunch of SKUs for this. There's a whole bunch of different options that you can add in this for redundancy purposes, to be able to allow your data centers to be able to actually communicate with each other over these circuits. So it's not just connecting to the cloud, but also connecting to each other. So with something like global reach, FastPath is an option that we have if you're trying to minimize the delay in the path. That will actually bypass the ExpressRoute gateway that you would have in your gateway subnet. There's a whole bunch of other options. Understand the differences between the private peering and Microsoft peering only. Let's see if there's anything else. They kind of go into here. Yeah, there's just a bunch of stuff with ExpressRoute that you need to be familiar with. And pretty much that ties back to understanding the gateways and then understanding the differences in the SKUs. And then this last option that you have here, so you have all these different types of gateways that you could end up getting. In order to kind of tie this together and make it be a little bit easier instead of having to have all these different types of gateways, there's this Azure Virtual WAN architecture which you can get, which allows you to kind of do this more kind of like a managed service, I guess. It streamlines it a bit. So yeah, being aware of the virtual WAN, again, the SKUs related to that, the scale units as well as the SKUs. So everything that you buy when you do that is scaled for like a certain amount of bandwidth, right? So VPN SKUs might be, you know, at 500 megabits per unit, where ExpressRoute stuff might be at like, you know, 1.5 gigabits per second per unit. So understanding which stuff falls into all of those. Design and implement application delivery services. This is the stuff that I am not as strong on. So this is dealing with all their different types of load balancers, understanding the differences between the load balancers. So the Azure load balancer is kind of more for layer 4 load balancing. you wouldn't necessarily go with this direct if you had like websites and things like that. And there's some different options that you would use if you're using it publicly or internally. Again, a whole bunch of different SKUs to understand with that. Understanding how you can create NAT rules, inbound, outbound, and the different reasons why you would do that if you wanted traffic to be going to certain things in your server pools. Azure Application Gateway, this is going to be the one that you would use more for web-based stuff. Also helps with the end-to-end encryption, especially if you're also using Azure Front Door, this is kind of like a regional solution where Azure Front Door is going to be more of a global solution. You can actually have them kind of work in concert together. So how to go about setting up all the different things, backend pools, probes to make sure that the devices that are in the pool are healthy, listeners, that's kind of for the different types of connections that you'd have coming inbound to it, how to set up HTTP, HTTPS settings, things like that. So Azure Front Door, as I mentioned, kind of like the global solution for the web traffic, work in concert with Application Gateway. Kind of some similar things that you need to understand from a configuration perspective. And then Azure Traffic Manager, and how this is actually more like a DNS-based global solution for load balancing the layer 4 traffic. Let's see, in this section here, dealing and implement private access to Azure services. This is where you kind of get into endpoints. And if you've done anything with AWS, then you know that they have endpoints as well. It's pretty much allows you to create kind of a connection from other types of services into your particular VNet. And that connection could either be to other Azure services, it could be to third-party services, it could be to your own services, and making them be available to other people across the cloud. There's a whole bunch of different options here, both with service endpoints and private endpoints, different reasons why you'd use one over the other. The private endpoints, for instance, would be what you would use to provide connectivity or hybrid connectivity from your data center across, either a VPN or ExpressRoute to be able to get to those where service endpoints don't really support that way. Secure network connectivity to Azure resources. So these are pretty much ACLs. So dealing with network security groups. They're ACLs, but they are stateful. You can apply them both at the NIC level or at the subnet level. Application security groups is a way where you can actually take individual NICs and assign them to application security group. That just makes it easier to attach different network security groups to a whole bunch of different devices. How to create these, you're going to need to know how to create these, how to apply them, where you can apply them, how to view the logs, validate the logs. Understanding the order of precedence within an NSG, understanding how to look at it at different NSGs and determine which traffic can go through. You might see a bunch of scenarios where they're going to lay out different VNets with different hosts and different subnets with different NSGs, and you're going to have to take all that data and figure out, okay, this NSG is attached to this host that's in this subnet, that's in this VNet. This VNet may or may not be peered or connected to another VNet, or maybe it's peered to something hybrid connectivity back on-prem, and figure out whether or not, like, hey, if will this server be able to go to that server over a certain port? You definitely want to be able to understand how those work and how to analyze them to make sure that data flows are working properly, and also how to fix it if it's not doing what you expect it to do. So kind of similar from a protection standpoint, Azure Firewall and Firewall Manager. Again, SKUs, understanding SKUs, understanding the pricing for policies. You want to make sure that you understand that. Where firewalls would kind of sit from an architecture perspective, how you would get traffic to them with user-defined routes. all of that good stuff. And then web application firewalls, how you would actually use and apply those on both Azure Front Door and the application gateway. Hopefully this is the last time I say it. SKUs, you gotta know the difference in the SKUs between the WAFs. Want to know different options as far as configuring both to just like monitor and then also how to block traffic, how to implement, create different policies. Yeah, I think understanding how to look at the logs from those and understand what's in the log. So that's kind of, a pretty quick breakdown of all of the different stuff that the exam covers itself. Let's briefly talk about some of the different resources that I used and you can use as well to be successful in your studies and go pass this exam. So right off the bat, first thing I'm going to tell you, and I pretty much put a link for this in almost every video that I do. Especially in this exam, you're going to need hands-on lab experience. So if you don't have an Azure account, go get one. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you get for free for 12 months. You also get a $200 Azure credit. The only thing that sucks with that is you only got it for 30 days. So if you are going to do this, kind of make sure you have stuff lined up so you can get the most out of the $200. And I would say in order to have things lined up so you can get the most out of the $200, I would highly recommend their self-paced AZ-700 Design Implementing Microsoft Azure Networking Solutions Learning Path. This is what I've been doing my lab videos from that I've been filming and putting up. This would be my first stop for training and studying, and this is what I used the most when it came to prepping for this exam. So it has lessons, it covers different things, breaks it down, gives you all sorts of different types of information, and then follows it up with different types of labs that you can do. And it walks you through how to do all of these. And if you want a little bit more help with those, then check out my videos. I'm going to show you that playlist here in a few minutes. But I can't stress this enough. This is a great resource. It's free. Couple this up with the free $200 credit, and you're on your way. Just be efficient with your time when it comes to making your way through this. So it pretty much covers all of the stuff that we just went through in that study guide. The basics of virtual networking, hybrid solutions. So that's going to be all your VPN type of stuff, ExpressRoute. Then we get into different types of load balancing, non-HTTPS and HTTPS traffic, network security. So that's your DDoS, your NSGs, firewall, and WAF. Then private access. So again, that was like the different types of endpoints that we talked about, and then different options that we have for actually monitoring and viewing logs and troubleshooting. So definitely check this out. Link in the video description. The next thing that I would recommend, I actually did a giveaway for this, I don't know, maybe like a month ago. Might be the best $15 that you can spend from a Azure networking perspective. This is a great book, great supplemental information to couple the self-paced training program here. I got this, and since I'd already gone through this, I think this is almost like 300 pages. Lots of diagrams, lots of kind of screenshots of things, but I was able to blow through this in like 3 or 4 days. But it really helped reinforce the stuff that I'd already learned from here. So I definitely recommend this book. I got a link for this in the video description as well. Previously, I talked about practice tests. And there's some that are kind of like official from Microsoft. I believe they're pretty expensive. I want to say it was like almost the same price as the exam, or it might have been like $100 or something like that. And I wasn't necessarily too psyched about that. So what I did was I signed up for an account on Cloud Guru. they actually have their own AZ-700 course. You can kind of see what they have in here. Also comes with a lab, so I didn't use it, so I'm not sure. But for some reason, I feel like the lab that you can use with this isn't using your own stuff, so that might save you some money if you've already used up the $200 credit. But they have all this. Almost everything that they cover here is what is in this free course. So that wasn't the reason that I got it. What I did get it for was that they had 3 practice exams with like 55 questions on each. I read some reviews that the practice exam questions were very, very good, but it wasn't a dump. I wasn't looking for a dump. So I wanted something that was going to be challenging and would help prepare me for the exam. And yeah, this was pretty solid. I got to the point where I was doing at least 1 test a day. I like the fact that they give you reasons why something is or isn't correct. I always find that's kind of the best way when doing practice tests. If you wanted to go that route and do that, it's $35 a month. Maybe you feel like spending that, maybe you don't. $35 a month, though, gets you access to everything they have. And they have different resources and training programs for pretty much everything cloud related. So might be worth it for you to do that. For me, definitely for the practice exams, it was worth spending $35 for the month. Let's see. One other thing I definitely would recommend. This is an awesome video by John Savill. He does a bunch of cloud stuff. This AZ-700 Design Implement Azure Networking Studies Super Guide. This is about a 3-hour long video. It kind of covers everything that I talked about in the study guide, but goes much, much, much more in depth. Once you kind of understand all the different things that you're studying, I would highly recommend going and checking out this video kind of as just like a nice recap to make sure that you've covered all the areas that you need to cover. He hits most of the stuff. I mean, like, it's not going to be as in depth as a 24-hour class, but for a 3-hour thing covering most of the stuff, he does an excellent job. And yeah, it'd be highly beneficial to check this out once you get ready for that. And then the last thing I mentioned would be my own playlist with the labs. You can go and check these out. I'm still filming a bunch more of these, so hopefully I'll have at least 10 lab videos for you to check out. And these are aligned with the different labs that we're doing in here. So pretty good stuff. So I'm going to say that is probably about everything that I wanted to cover. One last thing I'll throw up just to kind of tie all of this stuff together is, so this little infographic up here of kind of all the different things and kind of the cost for stuff. So if you get the free $200 credit, then the Azure environment would, for the most part, be free as long as you don't leave stuff running. I kind of find AWS a little bit easier to deal with as far as their bill alerting and stuff like that. But this stuff can run away from you, especially once you start getting into some of the higher end networking devices and things like that. So you definitely don't want to be like leaving application gateways and firewalls and stuff like that running longer than the period of time that you need to do the lab for. So the nice thing with all of the different labs that are in the self-paced training stuff is at the end of each lab, they give you the commands to just go and wipe the whole environment. And a lot of the stuff that you're doing in there is automated with PowerShell scripts, so it's easy for you to keep spinning up the environment when you need to. So just keep that in mind. The other thing there, so like a Cloud Guru, $35 a month. The book that I liked is $15. And then the exam itself, and then altogether $215. So not too bad. I think that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to hit. Does anybody have any questions before we go and wrap this up for the evening? Appreciate folks checking this out. if you do have any other questions, you definitely can go and drop those in the comments, and I'll hit those up later. But if nobody has anything else, then yeah, we'll just wrap it up. So yeah, appreciate you checking it out. Make sure you smash the like button. I'm gonna have some more Azure Lab videos coming out soon. So all right, take care. Bye.